Innate psychologists gave 128 fifth graders a puzzle test. Afterwards, they praised each child with exactly one sentence. Half the kids heard, "Wow, you must be smart at this." The other half heard, "Wow, you must have worked really hard." One sentence, and minutes later, almost 40% of one group were lying about their scores. Nothing was at stake, and nobody would ever know. And still, they lied. What could one sentence of praise possibly do to a 10-year-old's brain? To understand it, I want to tell you a story. It's one of Japan's most famous short stories, Sangetsuki, written by Atsushi Nakajima in 1942. His retelling of a much older Chinese legend. A story about a man who turned into a tiger. 1,200 years ago, in Tang-dynasty China, there lived a young man named Jingliang. He was brilliant. He passed the empire's brutal civil service exam while still young, one of the hardest tests humanity has ever invented. Everyone agreed. This man had talent. He got a respectable government job, and he hated it, because Jingliang didn't want to be an official. He wanted to be a poet, and not a good poet, a great one whose verses would be recited for 1,000 years. So he quit. He walked away from the safe career and went home to write. And here is where the story turns strange. He didn't find teachers, he didn't join other poets. He didn't show his drafts to anyone. He sat alone, in a closed room, polishing poems that nobody was allowed to read. Why? Legend says he was trapped between two feelings that don't sound like they belong together. He was too proud to study under a master, because a genius shouldn't need one, and too ashamed to compete with ordinary poets. Because what if he lost? What if he tried his absolute hardest and turned out to be merely average? As long as he never truly tried, his talent stayed safe, untested, perfect, a jewel in a locked box that no one could ever appraise, including him. Meanwhile, his money ran out and his family went hungry. His poems went nowhere, because poems locked in a room can't go anywhere, so he crawled back to the bureaucracy. Except now, his juniors had become his bosses. The genius was taking orders from people he once outranked. And something in him began to crack. One night, on a business trip, he suddenly leapt out of bed, screaming. He ran into the darkness. He never came back. A year later, his old friend Yuan Kan was traveling through those same mountains at dawn. Suddenly, a tiger burst out of the brush and then did something no tiger does. Instead of attacking, it hid itself in the grass and spoke. It said, "That voice, could it be my old friend?" The tiger was Jingliang. What follows is one of the most famous confessions in East Asian literature. The tiger explains, calmly and precisely, exactly what turned him into a beast. He says, "I was destroyed by my cowardly pride and my arrogant shame. I feared I might not be a jewel, so I never dared to polish myself. Yet I half believed I was a jewel, so I could never stand among ordinary men." Read that line again. I feared I might not be a jewel, so I never dared to polish myself. He didn't fail because he lacked talent. He failed because protecting the idea of his talent became more important than using it. And while he was busy protecting it, the years quietly disappeared. And with them, the poems he could have written. Now, a quick honesty break. The original Tang-dynasty tale gave a more supernatural reason for the transformation. A curse, a punishment. The confession about pride and shame is Nakajima's contribution. In 1942, he took an old ghost story and turned it into psychology. His version struck such a nerve that it entered Japan's national textbook. Virtually every high schooler in Japan reads it. Millions of teenagers meet this tiger every year. A tiger who explains exactly how self-image can eat a person alive. But here's the wild part. 56 years after Nakajima wrote that confession, a psychologist measured it in a lab. That's the 1998 experiment we started with. Carol Dweck and Claudia Mueller at Columbia University. They gave kids puzzles and praised them in one of two ways. Then they watched what happened next. After the praise, each kid got a choice. Harder puzzles they could learn from, or easy ones that would make them look good. The children praised for effort mostly chose the challenge. The children praised for being smart mostly chose the easy way out. Already, one sentence had changed what they wanted. Then came round 2. Deliberately difficult puzzles. Everyone struggled, but they struggled differently. The effort-praised kids dug in. Many of them said the hard problems were the most fun. The talent-praised kids fell apart. Less persistence, less enjoyment, and worse scores than they'd started with. Same kids, same puzzles. The only difference was one sentence spoken 20 minutes earlier, and then the lying. Asked to report their scores anonymously, nearly 40% of the talent-praised group inflated their numbers. In the effort group, about 10%. Dweck's explanation: for those kids, smart had become their identity in that room. So a bad score wasn't information anymore. It was a threat. Sound familiar? Protect the jewel, never let it be appraised. Dweck eventually gave these two attitudes names you may have heard: fixed mindset and growth mindset. A fixed mindset treats ability as a fixed amount you were born with. So every test is a verdict on what you are. A growth mindset treats ability as something you build. So every test is just information. Same event, two completely different meanings, a judgment or a direction. Which brings us back to the tiger. Inside a fixed mindset, Li Zheng's strategy was actually rational. If every attempt is a verdict on your worth, the safest move is to never be measured. The tragedy is that never be measured and never improve turn out to be the same door. In the story, the tiger recites his surviving poems, and they're good. Almost great. Missing just one thing the story leaves hauntingly unnamed, the thing you only gain by being polished against other people. Second, honesty break, because this channel doesn't sell magic. When scientists test growth mindset training at scale, the average effect on grades is real, but small. A national experiment in 2019, over 12,000 students, found it mostly helped lower-achieving students. Mindset is a lever, not a superpower. But the praise effect replicated across all 6 of Dweck's original studies. One sentence, reliably redirecting what kids choose, and whether they lie. The lever is small, what it moves is not. So what do you do with this? Especially as an adult learning something new, where being a beginner feels embarrassing. First, praise process, not person. In others and in yourself. Not I'm good at this, but that approach worked. Not I'm bad at this, but that approach didn't. Second, Dweck's favorite word, yet. I can't do this is a verdict. I can't do this yet is a direction. It sounds like a cheap trick. It's actually a category change. Third, and this is the direct anti-Li Zheng move, show your work early while it's still bad. Every draft you show is a poem out of the locked room. Being polished hurts precisely because it's working. A jewel that's never appraised stays safe forever, and worthless forever. At the end of the story, the tiger makes one final request: take care of my wife and son. And then he adds, no, that request should have come first. Even now he realizes he put his poems before his people. Li Zheng never found out whether he was a jewel, not because the answer was no, because he never let anyone look. Somewhere in that 1998 classroom, a kid praised for effort looked at the hard puzzles and said, these are the fun ones. That kid and the tiger are the two endings of the same story. The question was never, am I talented? It was always, what am I willing to be bad at, long enough to get good? That one's still open. You get to answer it this week.